opening reading this morning is an excerpt from Reverend Sarah Lammert. We create a web of life. This is finally the time to let go of that crazy notion that we can live separate and aloof from one another. We create a web of life. This is the time at last that we can come home to each other, to our mutual belonging. We create a web of life. I met our guest speaker, Joannée DeBruhl, this past December at my work Christmas party. I picked a seat next to her as she looked interesting and knowing a bit about her husband, who I work with. We had great conversation, and I was very impressed with her initiative, knowledge, and exuberance. As the dinner went on, I started thinking she would be a great Sunday services speaker. I'm so grateful that she enthusiastically agreed to speak to us when I called her a few weeks later. Joannée DeBruhl became a farmer after being laid off in 2009. She was involved in starting the first community garden project for Gleaners Emergency Food Bank in Livingston County, and realized her passion and calling was growing healthy food for everyone. She attended MSU's Organic Farmer Training Program in 2010, and then owned and managed a certified organic vegetable farm for 9 years. She now works as the farm manager for One World Center. She is also working with MSU as a farm mentor for aspiring and beginning farmers. Welcome, Joannée, to our pulpit.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. And I was just telling Kimberly, it's nice to be in a place with bodies. We moved to Battle Creek about a year and a half ago, and I haven't had a chance to really get to meet people in person. So I'm excited to be here and to be asked to be part of this program. So I am going to talk to you a little bit about what I have been learning since I started working at One World Center. And I recently took a course in permaculture design, and it's kind of been that epiphany of how it all kind of fits together for me. So we'll be talking about care for people, care for planet, and a fair share for all. Next, please. I also get to figure out this Zoom thing. So, all right. So One World Center actually started as the Institute for International Cooperation and Development, and it was started in the 80s in Massachusetts. And in the late 90s, they decided they wanted to expand and have another school, and they decided to put it in the Midwest because their big focus had been working overseas with communities that needed to grow their own food and try to get out of poverty and hunger. So they bought 11 acres from Southwest Southwest College in Dowagiac, and there's a dormitory down on this side. It was a 2-story dormitory. It's still there, and that's where they started the classes. And then in 2003, they finished the conference center building where we now do our classes and have our primary kitchen. And then at some point, they added a hoop house and a little mini farm on the property. So their mission has always been to be a nonprofit research organization to inspire and empower ordinary people to take action against worldwide poverty and climate change. We cultivate social change through the power of ideas and direct action to build sustainable communities around the world. Next, please. So as I mentioned, we have 11 acres. The conference center, where the kitchen and classroom is on the far side. It's actually the west side of the property. Hoop house is in the middle, and the dormitory is on the end. And then we're really fortunate that on the south side of the property, there's Rudolphi Woods, which has 8 miles of nature trails. But then on the north side, you can see we have a corn and soybean field. So there's a lot of dust that comes into the dormitory and onto the property, which is a little frustrating, but it is what it is. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So One World Center has been offering programs, like I said, for over 30 years. One of the things that we found out when COVID hit was that we went from a campus of 50 people to 2. We couldn't get visas for people to come from overseas. We couldn't get visas to send them overseas. They have been so outward facing in terms of outside the United States that they realize that although we've been working with small communities in Benton Harbor, in Detroit, and in South Bend to help them work with like the women's shelter, one of the churches in Benton Harbor, they're actually still, they're dealing with the water crisis in Benton Harbor right now. And then to a community garden place in Detroit, we've been taking our participants there to teach them how to work with communities and then sending them overseas into Africa and South America. We decided that we needed to have a program that was closer to home. So they decided they were going to hire me as their farm manager to help teach people how to grow and to create different spaces on the property, and also to create a 6-month program in the United States called Shoulder to Shoulder. Their big philosophy is not that we come in and show people how to do things. It's how we come in and serve the projects that are already there and support the community efforts that are already there. We might be able to assist and give them some guidance, but our role is to support what they're already doing to help them be even more successful. So we, in 2020, St. Vincent has a volcano and it erupted, and it covered the entire island with 2 to 5 feet of ash, which was completely devastating. We have a sister school there called Richmond Vale Academy. So the last 2 years, they've been helping people dig out the ash, rebuilding their homes. And we started in January helping people rebuild their gardens. So the program we have in St. Vincent and in the Grenadines is working on climate change, but also helping them rebuild their gardens. This woman is on one of our videos on our website. And when she heard at the farmer's market that we were going to help people rebuild their gardens, she said, sign me up. I need some help. That would be super. We have gotten the okay to start our programs in Africa and South America this fall. So we're excited to be able to continue to do that. We've been working there, working on education programs, farmers clubs, wells, you name it, whatever the different communities need there. We've been working a lot with the AIDS, HIV, all of that for the last 30 years. So we're excited to be able to start going back there this fall. Next slide, please. So a little bit about my journey. Kimberly mentioned when we sat next to each other at dinner that I went to MSU, but I've been doing community projects for a really, really long time, and it has just spoken to my heart. The first thing I did was work on a community playground in North Carolina called the Big Play, where we rebuilt a community. It took 2 years of planning, and it was a 5-day crazy, rained all 5 days build, but over 2,000 people in the community, and there was only 5,000 people in that community, touched that project. It was really impactful and totally changed my life. When we moved to Brighton, I was able to help start the soup kitchen. Brighton is in Livingston County, and at the time, it was the second largest food insecure county in Michigan. But it's a bedroom community for Lansing and Detroit and Ann Arbor, and poverty there is invisible. But we had no soup kitchen. We had no emergency, the food bank didn't have any community gardens. So I was able to help with that program. And then in 2009, after I had been working with Liberty Mutual as a safety engineer for 21 years, I got laid off and did the community garden for Gleaners and went, oh my gosh, how can I grow food for people like for a living? And I was lucky enough to qualify for the No Worker Left Behind program. I attended MSU's Organic Farmer Training Program, and my tuition was paid for. And 2 weeks before I finished that program, I met 2 people who wanted to start a farm with me. So we started Stone Coop Farm in Brighton, Michigan, and we did that for 9 years. It was a certified organic vegetable farm. And we had over 60 volunteers that came every single week that worked on the farm. So we built another community there, which was really exciting. In 2019, we had to close the farm. And I flitted around a lot of different places for a couple of years and was Super excited to find One World Center in last May. So I've only been there since May. And I'll tell you a little bit about the permaculture design class, but if we can go to the next slide, that'd be super. So when I got to One World Center, they said, we want you to be a farm manager, have tons of experience. You know how to grow things. And I went, oh yeah, I totally know how to grow things. And I said, well, let's figure out, what do you actually want? So we looked at our 11-acre property, and I'll see if I can get to, let's see, I'm going to step to the side here. So when we looked at the property, these are the things that they wanted to happen on the property. The conference center in the center has a 60-foot by 60-foot courtyard. It's beautiful, but it's just concrete pavers. So they want us to build a garden inside there that could be an example of growing in pots if you don't have your own garden space or your own land. Then the kitchen is on the south side of the property. They wanted us to build a kitchen garden as an example for showing how do you have a small kitchen garden in your own backyard and how can you grow a ton of food there. We had the hoop house. So they want to show a small scale, intensively grown farm. Then they wanted to do some permaculture because they do permaculture classes in St. Vincent, but they wanted to have that here on their own property. And they wanted to bring more wildlife. We have deer, we have birds, but we want to encourage more of that to come to our property. We also needed to change our entrance, make it more welcoming. We got MEEP certified last year, the Michigan Environmental Assurance something program. So we're MEEP certified farmstead location this year. And then in the dormitory, we need to figure out how to prevent all that dust from blowing onto the clothesline from the corn and soybean fields. So we want to build some living fences and add some flowers and then have some places that are outdoor classrooms and contemplative spaces where people are going through the classes so they have some time to just figure out, how to process the information they're learning. So they hired me so we could tie this all in together. This is great. I can do all of this. And then I started looking at the 9 acres of grass and went, I don't know how to do this. So I focused on the farm because I knew how to grow things. So if we can go to the next slide. So I knew a little bit about permaculture. I've had some, half-hour things. I've got a couple books. I've done some skimming. And I knew the basic concepts for permaculture. The permaculture ethics are care for planet, care for people, and a fair share for all. Next slide, please. And for me, that always made sense because I've known about the Great Law of the Iroquois for a long, long time. And that's basically making a conscious choice when you make a decision on how is it going to impact the next 140 years, the next 7 generations. So on my farm, when I'd make a decision about where I was going to put my road, where I was going to put my trees, I wasn't thinking about 5 years or 1 year. I was trying to think about how can this be here 140 years from now? So when I started taking the permaculture class and learned more about it, I realized permaculture doesn't stand for permanent agriculture. It stands for permanent culture. So it's the same concept. It's building communities for something beyond our lifetime. It's for the future. Bill Mollison and David Holgram were the ones who came up with the concept and the verbiage of permaculture in the 70s. They're both from Australia, and they were seeing a lot of destruction of the Aboriginal lands as well as the landscapes, and they wanted to do something to change that. So that's where the word permaculture came from, and it's been around for a really long time. Next slide, please. So the basic principles for permaculture, and I'm going to step to the side again because I can't get my phone to work. There's 12 basic concepts. So the first one is creatively use and respond to change. The next is observe and interact. At 3 on the clock is catch and store energy. The next is obtain a yield because it is about growing food. The next is apply self-regulation and accept feedback. Then you want to use and value renewable resources and services. You want to produce no waste, design from patterns and design and details to details. Integrate rather than segregate. Use small and slow solutions. Use and value diversity. And then use the edges and value the marginal. So for me, one of the concepts when you use the design principles is it's impossible to look at all 12 at the same time, especially when you're building for a lifetime. So I decided at One World Center, since I've only been there since May, not even a year yet, the first thing I have to do is observe and interact. I don't know where the sun comes in. I don't know where the frost pockets are. And I don't know how One World Center uses the property. I don't live there. So I needed to figure out how and what is needed there and how is the property used. The next, which was an easy one for me, is obtain a yield. I know how to grow food and I know how to grow a lot of food. So I went, okay, that one's easy. I can figure that one out. I don't have to think too hard about that. I've got that plan. I've been doing it for the last 12 years. And then the last one, which is a constant reminder for me, is to use slow and small solutions, which means I can't tear up 9 acres of grass in 1 year. I need to do it small, intentional, and do it slowly to make sure I'm doing it correctly. So I constantly have to go, slow down, Joannée. Of course, I've ordered 400 plants, but only 40 of them are fruit trees. So that's what the permaculture principles are. Next, please. So when I was going through the class, I realized care for people, care for planet, and a fair share for all is what One World Center is about anyways. It was the epiphany of, it's not a new concept. We're just going to try to meld our property with what we've been doing for decades. And that was a really exciting concept for me to think, I'm not bringing something new. I'm just incorporating this beautiful land that we have to accomplish our goals in the long term, to care for people, care for planet, and a fair share for all. Next, please. So one of the things that we decided to do last year, there's an organization called WOOF. I don't know if anyone has heard of it. It's actually worldwide opportunities on organic farms, and it's an international organization. Many countries have their own platform. The United States is one of them. But you can go anywhere in the world and work on an organic farm. You give your time while you're there, and they give you housing and food for your labor. So we decided we were going to try WOOF. So because we had nobody pretty much on the property for 2 years, our hoop house was pretty sad. The plastic had torn. Nobody had been doing any farming. We had lots of weeds. The raised beds were in terrible shape. So when I walked in on my first interview, I said, oh, we're going to grow. We have a hoop house. That's fantastic. We'll put plastic. We'll trellis the tomatoes. I looked up and I went, you don't have any trusses. No wonder the whole thing is shifting from the wind, from the plywood end walls. So I said, the first thing we need to do is we need to shore this hoop house up and add some structural supports. So in July, we were able to add those structural supports. We were able to get some of the weeding. You can see we've started to grow some crops. And it was super successful so that we continued the WOOFs through the season. And now we're doing even more with the woofer program this year. Next slide, please. So by November, we had our plastic. We had our hoop house planted for November. My woofers are helping me get it all organized. We're trying to get rid of all the grass still. But we've got spinach, arugula, salad mix, kale, chards, cilantro, and we're still harvesting off those beds that we planted in September. And we've been able to do a harvest every single week. And so the hoop house acts like a passive solar greenhouse. So that was one of the things I learned at MSU and one of the things I got to perfect on my own farm so that we can have greens for our campus all year long as part of our self-sustainability. Next slide, please. One of the parts too is that we had our teams come to One World Center, the ones that were going to be the climate team in the 10-month program going to St. Vincent. They arrived in October, so I got to have them out in the field and in the hoop house to learn more about farming. And so these folks here are actually from Germany, France, United States, Costa Rica, and Colombia. So it was really exciting to have all these international young folks there, excited to learn about farming in the snow. And then go to the next slide, please. And then in January, they went to St. Vincent and they started planting community gardens, and they're going to be there until June. So those same crews now are in the tropics, helping those folks, now that they've dug out all the ash, rebuild their community gardens. And it's been fun to hear their stories and see their pictures on what they're accomplishing. Next slide, please. So basically, that's a little bit about permaculture. It's a little bit about One World Center. If you would like to help us, please, I brought some brochures. There's 3 different brochures like this. It talks about our 6-month program, the 10-month program, and our programs in Africa and South America. We also are looking for people to join us as a woofer. So if anybody wants to learn about farming and permaculture, they can come and stay on campus with us. We've got people staying for up to 3 months right now, which is fantastic. You could also coordinate a volunteer day if you would like to come out and actually get your hands in the dirt and help us implement some of our permaculture plans. And we're also obviously taking donations. So those are some of the ways that you could help us out. So that's my spiel, and I can answer some questions later on. But thank you for letting me speak with you today.